You're listening to Nocturnal Nightmares. While the world sleeps peacefully, we open the door to what lies beneath. The stories that surface in silence, the fears that rise in the dark. These are not dreams, they are reminders. Stay with us. And don't close your eyes just yet. Dusk was settling like fine grey dust when Arthur arrived at the Sovereign Arms. The lobby exhaled a breath of stagnant time, the scent of upholstery that had absorbed decades without disturbance. Behind the scarred mahogany counter stood Silas the clerk, a man whose gaze seemed permanently anchored to the desk plotter. He murmured a request for Arthur's name, slid a tarnished key across the wood, his eyes never truly meeting Arthur's. A prickle of unease surfaced, instantly subdued by the profound weariness of travel. Rumors about this place dissolved against the urgent need for rest. A hot cascade of water, a horizontal surface. Nothing else held currency. The ascent in the lift gauge was a slow, grudging affair, punctuated by tremors in the metal frame and the epileptic flicker of the single overhead bulb. Arthur kneaded his temples, questioning the wisdom of this entire business venture. Emerging onto the fourth floor, his shoes sank slightly into a threadbare runner, carpeted with constellations of ambiguous stains. The corridor stretched before him, bathed in a weak nicotine-hued light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. His assigned door, number 412, looked distinctly more weathered than its neighbors, the brass knob mottled with verdigris, the lower panels scored and scraped. The key protested in the lock, a brief metallic stubbornness before yielding with a click. Within the room offered a stale bouquet of dust motes and the sharp, inadequate tang of cheap disinfectant. A narrow bed hugged the right wall. Opposite stood a tall, somber wardrobe. A small bathroom beckoned, its door slightly askew, promising a struggle to close fully. The lone window offered a grim vista, the sheer brick cliff of an adjacent building blotting out the sky. Claustrophobia breathed softly in the confined space. Arthur deposited his valise onto a diminutive table near the bed, extracting the wrinkled forms of his work shirts, mentally noting the task of locating an iron later. He sought the bathroom first, needing to wash away the grime of the journey. The bulb above the mirror glared with accusatory brightness, plunging the periphery into deeper shadow. Bending to the basin, he splashed frigid water onto his face. The cold, a welcome shock. His eyes felt gritty, his skin a map of travel fatigue. Straightening, he met his reflection and paused. It was him, undeniably, yet subtly wrong. The edges blurred, indistinct, his hairline smudged like a poorly erased pencil line, the curves of his ears distorted as if seen through moving water. He touched the cool glass, smooth, unblemished. Wiping it vigorously with a towel changed nothing. A trick of cheap glass, perhaps, or some unnoticed damage. He dismissed it, returning to the main room. After stowing a few items, he aimed the remote at the small television bolted to the wall. A flicker of static, then blackness. He tried again. The screen remained stubbornly inert. With a sigh, he tossed the remote onto the thin bedspread. A change of room, or at least a functional television, seemed warranted. He pulled open the door to the hallway, and a sudden intense coldness washed over his arms. A phantom draft from an unseen source. He stepped out, ignoring it, and made for the lift. Downstairs, the reception desk stood unmanned. The door to the small back office gaped open, revealing only shadows. Arthur tapped the counter, waited. The lobby's silence was profound, unnatural for a hotel. Minutes stretched. Defeated, he turned back towards the groaning elevator. Upon his return to the fourth floor, the door to room 412 hung slightly ajar. He knew, with chilling certainty, he had closed it. A wave of disquiet crested within him. He pushed the door inward cautiously, scanning the interior. Nothing appeared disturbed. His valise remained on the table, his clothes undisturbed. Yet the bathroom door was now wide open, the harsh light spilling out, a light he distinctly remembered extinguishing. A fine sweat bloomed on his palms. Just tired, he told himself. Overtired. He switched off the bathroom light, pulled the door firmly shut, and double-locked the main door to the corridor. Night fell with swift finality. His call to room service was met with the baffling news that the kitchen was closed. Barely 8 o'clock. The line crackled with static before the voice on the other end disconnected abruptly. Hunger gnawed, but the thought of venturing out again held no appeal. He consumed a protein bar from his bag, washing it down with tap water that carried a distinct metallic tang. Changing into sweats and a t-shirt, he doused the lights and slid beneath the covers. The sheets felt unnervingly damp, and the ambient temperature seemed to plummet. Goose flesh pebbled his arms once more. He tugged the thin blanket from the foot of the bed. It offered negligible comfort. Sleep remained elusive. A whisper began, insidious and low, seeming to coil just at the edge of hearing. A sound that might have been his name. Arthur Vaughton breathed out endlessly, softly, impersonally. His heart began a heavy thudding against his ribs. He strained to listen, attributing it to hallway noise. The wind perhaps, though the building felt hermetically sealed against any breeze. The susurrus persisted, a relentless quiet chant. His throat constricted. A faint dizziness washed over him. Forcing his eyes shut, he battled the sound, eventually succumbing to an uneasy slumber. He awoke abruptly. His watch showed midnight. Only a couple of hours had passed. The whisper lingered embedded in the very fabric of the room, now accompanied by a faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails on wood. An old pipe, he reasoned, though the sound felt too deliberate. The air hung thick and heavy, the dampness in the sheets seeming to have intensified, clinging clammily to his skin. He sat bolt upright, fumbled for the bedside lamp. Its weak glow illuminated a room subtly altered. The walls felt closer, the furniture positioned at slightly uncanny angles. Breathing shallowly, a primal reluctance to leave the perceived safety of the bed held him captive. Eventually, the need to clear his head propelled him towards the bathroom. Flicking the switch, the light assaulted his eyes. He glanced at the mirror. The distortion remained, but now, something else hovered in the periphery. Behind his reflected shoulder, near the drab shower curtain, lurked a vague shape, less person than a patch of undulating darkness. His hand trembled violently. He spun around. The shower alcove was empty, innocuous. Whipping back to the mirror, the shape had vanished. His breath hitched, his pulse hammered in his ears. He sought normalcy in the ritual of washing his face. the water shockingly cold, setting his teeth chattering as he dried his skin with a small rough towel. That peculiar cold caress brushed the nape of his neck, raising the hairs on his arms. Leaning close to the mirror, searching for flaws, water spots, anything to explain the persistent blur around his reflected face and shoulders, like motion smearing in a low-quality video feed. He found nothing. He pressed a hand to his chest, taking a slow, ragged breath. Back in the bedroom, the desire for fresh air became overwhelming. He wrestled with the window, pulling upwards with all his strength, but it refused to yield, jammed fast in its frame. The latch was clearly disengaged, yet the sash remained immovable. Defeated, arms aching, he stepped back. The room was undeniably colder now, permeated by a draft that seemed to emanate not from the sealed window, but from the very plaster of the walls. He ventured into the hallway again, desperate for any sign of life, another soul, a staff member. Emptiness greeted him. The elevator indicator showed it quiescent on a floor above. The stairwell, located behind a heavy fire door at the corridor's far end, proved locked. A fire escape route locked, the absurdity hammered at his fraying nerves. Heart pounding, he retreated to his room, the only sanctuary, however, compromised. He lifted the receiver of the in-room phone. The line was utterly dead. Silence. His mobile phone displayed no service. Calls to any number failed. Panic began to tighten its grip. He paced the small confines, the walls seemed to press inwards. One last futile attempt with the television remote yielded only darkness. His watch showed it was just past 1. Retrieving a small flashlight from his valise, he switched off the overhead light, plunging the room into near blackness save for the lamp's weak circle. He approached the wardrobe, pulling the door open, hoping for extra blankets, anything. Inside hung a single wire hanger, and incongruously an old dust-laden suitcase, clearly not his own. The flashlight beam picked out faded initials embossed on its side, illegible with time and grime. As he peered closer, that icy current of air swept past him again, making him jump. He spun, flashlight beam cutting through the empty air. His skin prickled. Backing away, he firmly closed the wardrobe door, resolving not to investigate the suitcase further. The whisper returned clearer now, his name repeated in a flat, monotonous tone. Arthur, Arthur. Resolve hardening, he decided to leave, consequences be damned. He flung open the room door, only to see the hallway lights stutter violently, casting elongated, dancing shadows along the walls, shadows without discernible origin. He strode towards the elevator, but its indicator remained frozen on an upper floor. He jabbed the call button repeatedly. Nothing. The whisper intensified, seeming to press physically against his eardrums. Turning on his heel, he hurried back towards 412, slamming the door shut behind him. His body trembled uncontrollably. Throat tight, he dragged the thin blanket and damp sheets from the bed, wrapping them around himself as he sank to the floor, back pressed against the cool wall. He fought for rationality. Old building, faulty wiring, plumbing noises, suggestion. But the mirror, the impossible cold, the shadows. His stomach churned. He stared at the door, half expecting the knob to turn. Around 2, the main overhead light flickered once, twice, then died completely, leaving only the bedside lamp and his flashlight beam slicing through the oppressive dark. The whispering modulated, becoming a faint, dry scraping, like claws on wood. He scrambled to his feet, sweeping the flashlight beam around the room. The wardrobe. Its door was slightly ajar again. He was certain. He had closed it. Heart hammering, he approached cautiously, hand outstretched to push it shut. The wood groaned under his touch. Inside, empty shelves met his light, but a flicker of movement registered in his peripheral vision. He froze, illuminating the deep recesses. Nothing. He retreated, his gaze drawn to the bathroom. The door stood open once more, the harsh light blazing within, defying his earlier action. He moved towards it, steps leaden, knees weak. A low, steady hum emanated from within. A tonal vibration just below hearing. Hand on the knob, he peered inside. The mirror's surface was an abyss, not reflective, but utterly black, absorbing the light. He couldn't see himself, the room, anything, just a flat, dark void. Hesitantly, he touched the glass. Ice cold, then something flickered within the blackness, a shape sliding across the void where his reflection should have been. His chest seized. He snatched his hand back, slamming the bathroom door shut. The whisper surged, seeming to curl directly behind his left ear. Tears blurred his vision. Breath came in ragged gasps. He grabbed his jacket, fumbled in his valise for his rental car keys. Stairs, locked or not, he would force them. Back in the hallway, he threw his weight against the heavy stairwell door. It remained stubbornly solid. He pulled, strained until his shoulders screamed, then resorted to banging, shouting into the indifferent silence. No response. The corridor lights continued their erratic pulse. The phantom shadows writhed on the far wall, melting around the corner. Desperate, he ran back to the elevator, hammering the call button. A groan echoed from the shaft, then the grinding sound of ancient machinery engaging. The indicator light shifted. It was descending. A fragile tendril of relief pierced his terror. The doors juddered open, revealing a dimly lit, mold-scented interior. He lunged inside, frantically pressing the lobby button. The door sealed him in. The cage rattled, then jerked to a halt between floors. Total darkness engulfed him as the lights died. He nearly dropped the flashlight. He pounded on the doors, his voice cracking, shouting for help. Tears streamed down his face. The whisper was inside the elevator with him now, relentless. Arthur, Arthur, Arthur. A blast of frigid air swept across his face. He gasped, fumbling blindly at the control panel, fingers slipping on the smooth buttons. Useless. Then, after an eternity, another violent jerk, and the elevator resumed its groaning descent. It stopped. The doors slid open. Onto the fourth-floor hallway he had just fled. He stumbled out, staring in disbelief, as the door to room 412 swung wide open. An invitation or a trap. A sickening lurch of non-progress. The lift had deposited him precisely where he'd begun. A cruel jest played by the building's tormented mechanics. His breath hitched. He jabbed the door open button, but the door slid shut, the cage ascending silently, abandoning him. No choice remained. He walked zombie-like towards his room. Just as he reached it, the door swung silently shut. His heart felt like a trapped bird against his ribs. He placed his hand on the knob. It felt strangely warm, almost hot to the touch. Turning back was impossible. There was nowhere else. He twisted the knob. It yielded without resistance. Inside, the darkness was absolute. Even the bedside lamp was now extinguished. He stepped across the threshold, the door clicking shut behind him. The whisper abruptly ceased, replaced by the faint, insistent scraping from the wardrobe. He edged towards the bed, flashlight beam trembling. The wardrobe door was closed tight again, yet he could see the wood vibrating faintly. How long until morning? Survival was the only imperative. Daylight might banish this. He would endure, then flee. He perched on the edge of the bed, clutching the flashlight like a talisman, teeth chattering violently as the cold air eddied around him. He glanced at the bathroom door, still shut. Then, the mattress dipped beside him. A distinct pressure, as if someone had sat down. He leaped up whirling, flashlight beam spearing the empty space. Nothing but the indentation lingered for a heart-stopping moment before the fabric slowly smoothed itself out. A profound numbness, born of sheer terror, washed over him. He backed against the far wall facing the bed, flashlight held high, waiting. Waiting until the first tentative fingers of dawn probed through a gap in the heavy curtains, painting the oppressive dark with faint strokes of gray. The room seemed, fractionally, less malevolent. He gathered his belongings with frantic haste, cramming clothes into the valise, heedless of creases. The door opened easily. The hallway appeared unchanged, the lights now burning with steady, mundane normalcy. He sprinted to the elevator, stabbed the button. It arrived promptly, blessedly empty. This time the descent was swift, direct. The doors opened onto the lobby. Silas stood behind the counter, engrossed in paperwork. Arthur stammered his intention to check out. The clerk offered no inquiry, merely produced a bill. Arthur paid without looking at it, then practically bolted through the front doors, into the cool promise of morning air, gulping it down like water. He didn't look back. He threw himself into his rental car, engine roaring to life, tires squealing slightly as he pulled away. The meeting, the reason for his trip, evaporated from his mind. He drove, hands locked white-knuckled on the wheel, eyes flicking constantly to the rearview mirror, until he found another hotel, brightly lit, anonymous, crowded. A tremor still vibrated through him, a residue of the deep chill of room 412. He couldn't fathom what had transpired within those walls. Only that the memory of that cold, that whisper, would remain etched into him. Escape was all that had mattered. It was all that mattered still. A single cold bead struck Elias's cheek as he wrestled the final tent zipper closed. Above, the sky bruised, darkening from slate gray to an ominous charcoal, mirroring the knot tightening in his gut. This tranquil woodland escape, the one he'd painted so vividly for Clara and the children, was dissolving into something else entirely. He hadn't the faintest inkling then that the brewing tempest would soon seem the most trivial of their tribulations. "Is it going to rain hard, Papa?" Leo's voice, a fragile blend of thrill and trepidation, cut through the heavy air. His small face tilted upwards, eyes wide. Elias manufactured a smile. "Just a sprinkle, little bear. Nothing for us." Clara, guiding their daughter Maya into the larger canvas shelter, cast him a look steeped in skepticism. "Elias, perhaps we should reconsider. This feels heavier than a sprinkle." He shook his head, a measure of foolish pride stiffening his resolve. "We'll be snug. I checked the forecast meticulously. A passing shower, that's all." How bitterly he would regret ignoring that instinct, that quiet plea in her voice. The sprinkle became a drumming, then a roar. Rain lashed the tents, the rhythmic patter escalating into a furious assault against the canvas. Thunder cannoned across the ridges, each detonation closer than the last, while lightning ripped the darkness, momentarily etching the dripping forest onto their retinas. The children, unnerved, huddled close. Elias and Clara conjured distractions. Tales spun from memory, shadow creatures dancing in the flashlight beams. Eventually, as the hours bled away, the storm's fury abated. The relentless drumming softened, receding to a gentle cadence. The thunder muttered its departure into the distance, weighted by the day's hike and the storm's drama. Exhaustion claimed them all. Something prized Elias from sleep. Not a sound, but its absence. The forest, preternaturally silent, held its breath. The storm had slunk away unseen. His watch glowed. Just past 3. A wrongness prickled the air, slipping cautiously from the sleeping bag, careful not to disturb Clara. He eased the tent zipper open and stepped into the night. Mist coiled thick and phantom white, lending the familiar campsite an alien, unsettling aspect. As his vision swam into focus through the gloom, a cold dread sluiced through him. Their small haven had been violated. The picnic table, laden hours before with their cooler and provisions, lay overturned, its legs pointing accusingly at the sky. Gear from their packs lay scattered, trampled into the sodden earth. His first thought, a violent squall he'd slept through, evaporated under closer scrutiny. This was deliberate. Footprints, large and deep, churned the mud, prints belonging to none of them. And there, gouged into the wet bark of a sycamore, a crude, raw message screamed silently. "Leave, not your place." His pulse hammered against his ribs. He scrambled back to the tent. "Clara," he hissed, shaking her shoulder urgently. "Clara, wake up, we have to leave, now." She surfaced from sleep, blinking against the sudden intrusion. "What? Elias? What is it?" In frantic whispers, careful not to wake Leo and Maya, he relayed what he'd found. Clara's face drained of color, her eyes widening, reflecting the lantern's unsteady light. "The Rangers, call them," she urged, fumbling for her mobile. He nodded, watching her face fall as she stared at the screen. "Nothing," she breathed. No signal. Predictable, yet devastating. Miles from anywhere, cocooned in dense, dripping woods. Utterly alone. "Get the children up," Elias said, fighting to keep the tremor from his voice. "We pack light. Head straight for the car. It's only a couple of miles back." Clara nodded, swallowing hard, the fear stark in her eyes. They roused Leo and Maya, offering vague assurances that muted the rising panic in their own chests. Packing became a frantic, silent ballet of necessity. Their movements jerky, their senses straining against the oppressive quiet, eyes constantly flicking towards the black wall of trees encircling them. The children, absorbing the parental tension, were unnaturally subdued. They were poised to flee when Maya clutched his sleeve. "Papa," she whispered, her small finger trembling as she pointed towards the woods. Someone was watching. Elias's heart leaped. He scanned the impenetrable darkness where she indicated. Nothing. Then, a flicker. A shape detaching itself from the deeper shadows. Another. And another. "Clara?" His voice was low, tight with adrenaline. "Kids in the tent. Go." She didn't hesitate, herding Leo and Maya back inside the canvas folds. Elias stood his ground, a solitary figure attempting a bravery he didn't possess. "Who's out there?" he called, the sound swallowed by the damp air. "We're going. Just let us leave peacefully." Silence stretched, taut and menacing. Then, a voice, rough-edged and dripping with hostility, drifted from the trees. "Our land. You don't belong." Elias swallowed, his thoughts racing. "We're sorry. A mistake. We're packing right now. Gone in an hour." A coarse laugh scraped through the darkness. 10 minutes, then we come." Ice water flooded his veins. He spun back to the tent, hands fumbling with the zipper. Clara looked up, her face a pale mask in the lantern glow. "Now," he choked out, barely audible. "Leave it all. Just what we can carry." She nodded, terror flaring in her eyes. They moved with desperate speed, stuffing essentials into day packs. The children, blessedly intuitive, offered no resistance. As they emerged, the forest seemed to sigh around them, alive now with stealthy whispers, the snap of distant twigs, closer. "Stay tight," Elias murmured, gripping Maya's hand while Clara took Leo's. "To the car. Whatever you hear, don't stop running." They plunged into the woods, the flashlight beam a fragile weapon against the engulfing dark. The ground, slick with rain-soaked leaves and mud, betrayed them constantly. Unseen roots clawed at their ankles. Behind them, pursuit erupted. They weren't hiding now. Shouts, guttural whoops, echoed amongst the trees. A terrifying soundtrack spurring their flight. Minutes stretched into an eternity of panic scrambling when disaster found them. Leo's foot snagged. He pitched forward with a sharp cry. "My ankle!" he sobbed as Clara helped him up. "It hurts. I can't walk on it." The voices surged closer. Stopping was unthinkable. Wordlessly, Elias passed Maya to Clara, hoisted Leo onto his back. "Hold on, little bear," he grunted, staggering under the sudden weight. Almost there. They pressed onward, Elias's lungs burning, legs screaming protest. The shouts behind grew louder, laced with a raw, predatory excitement. They were gaining. Just as his strength threatened to buckle, a faint reflection winked through the trees. Metal. The car. "There!" he gasped. "Almost there!" They burst from the tree line into the small, muddy clearing. Elias fumbled with the keys, his fingers slick with sweat and grime. "Elias, hurry!" Clara cried, her gaze locked on the woods behind them. He saw them then, dark figures spilling from the trees. The car lock clicked, a sound amplified tenfold in the charged silence. They tumbled inside. He jammed the key into the ignition. The engine coughed, then roared, just as the first pursuer slammed a hand against the driver's side window. A face contorted in fury, briefly visible. Elias rammed the gear stick into reverse. Tires spun, spitting mud, then caught. They shot backward, narrowly avoiding a thick oak, before he wrenched the wheel, aiming the hood towards the faint track leading out. In the rearview mirror, receding figures stood silhouetted against the trees, watching them vanish into the night. They didn't speak, didn't slow down until the comforting lights of the nearest town bloomed ahead. Adrenaline still sang in their veins as Elias pulled into the deserted parking lot of the local police station. Clara turned to him, her face luminous and pale in the nascent dawn. "Elias, what was that? Who were they?" He shook his head, the night's events replaying in a chaotic loop. "I don't know, but we're safe. That's the thing." Waiting for the station doors to open, the chilling reality settled over him. The forest, his sanctuary, his place of solace, now felt tainted, imbued with a lurking malevolence. He looked at his family. Clara, arm protectively around Maya. Leo, gingerly flexing his swollen ankle. And a wave of profound guilt washed over him. His pride, his dismissal of Clara's intuition, had led them here, to the ragged edge of disaster. I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice thick. "You were right, Clara. I should have listened. This is my fault." Her hand found his, her grip firm, grounding. "We're okay, Elias. We got out, together. That's what matters." As the first rays of sun gilded the sleepy town, Elias made a silent, fervent promise. Never again. No adventure was worth this terror. The wilderness, majestic and untamed, harbored shadows he'd never truly acknowledged. They had sought simple communion with nature and found themselves hunted through its depths. But they had endured, together. And sitting there, bathed in the improbable light of morning, he knew, with piercing clarity, that was everything. Tents and coolers were transient things. This unit, this fragile, resilient family, huddled beside him, was all that held meaning. As they braced themselves to recount the ordeal, he understood the night would forever be etched into their lives, a stark testament to nature's indifference. The darkness coiled within perceived tranquility, and the unyielding strength found in facing down fear side by side. Just shy of midnight, I found myself before a grand desolation of the old ballroom. My meager provisions, a torch, pen, notebook, a thermos brimming with coffee, a paper-shrouded sandwich, and a folded blanket, were consolidated in a small rucksack slung over one shoulder. I paused, absorbing the facade. Immense wooden doors, scarred and veiled in dust, their handle radiating a metallic chill against my palm. It yielded without protest, swinging inward on silent hinges. An airless silence greeted me, thick with the scent of time itself. Along the walls, sconces held candles already weeping wax, their flames sputtering weakly, casting a hesitant, dancing light. Who had kindled them remained a mystery. The place felt utterly deserted. From a shadowed corner, the thin, hollow strains of a gramophone drifted, weaving a slow, melancholic tune through the stillness, though no hand guided its needle. Securing the door behind me, I advanced into the cavernous space. Each footfall onto the vast parquet floor elicited a groan from the aged timbers beneath, a low, uneven symphony of creaks that shifted in pitch with my passage, disturbingly akin to whispers just below the wood's surface, an unnerving notion I refused to entertain. The atmosphere hung heavy with the ghosts of aromas, decayed fabric mingling with the faint tang of furniture polish. Mirrors lined the perimeter, their surfaces clouded, stained by neglect. Within the depths, shapes flickered, reflections that bore no relation to my own solitary presence. When I stilled myself, pairs of figures materialized in the glass, spectral partners engaged in slow, circling waltzes. They seemed dancers from a bygone era, their feet hovering inches above the floorboards, faces indistinct blurs of pallor, their attire antiquated. Together, they turned, hands poised in adherence to some unheard choreography. My attention snagged on the gramophone's persistent scratch, the needle tracing the same groove endlessly. The melody, fragile yet insistent, simply began anew without pause. Approaching the device, I confirmed its solitude. The winding handle remained motionless, the record spinning in its unwavering loop. Leaning closer, scrutinizing its workings, I could discern no mechanism, no trip or lever that might explain its ceaseless repetition. I retreated, leaving the enigma to its spectral performance, returning my gaze to the ballroom's heart. Candlelight sculpted the emptiness, throwing mobile shadows that writhed upon the floor and climbed the walls. No chairs, no tables populated the expanse. Only dust motes dancing in the gloom, the tarnished mirrors, and their phantom occupants. A glance over my shoulder confirmed the door's presence, a potential escape route I needed to be certain of. Reaching for the handle, I tried to turn it. It held fast. A harder pull met unyielding resistance. It was locked. Pressing my shoulder against the solid wood proved futile. It refused to budge. A forced calm settled over me. Extracting my notebook, I attempted to chronicle the scene, my script wavering in the inadequate light. The time, minutes past the midnight hour. I detailed the room's dimensions, the inexplicable candles, the looping music, the dancers trapped in glass. Leaving the notebook open on the floor, I commenced a careful circuit of the room's edge. My fingers traced the walls. They felt substantial beneath the peeling paint, cracks spiderwebbed across several mirrors. Attempting to clear one with my sleeve merely smeared the grime. Yet through the haze, The couples continued their slow, oblivious spinning. They offered no acknowledgement, lost in their unending dance. I stepped back, listening intently. Beyond the gramophone's lament and the floor's quiet complaints, silence reigned. "Hello?" I called out, the words swallowed by the vastness unanswered. Then a distinct light pressure settled on my arm, the unmistakable feel of a hand resting there. I whipped my head around. Nothing. No one stood beside me. As I jerked my arm away, the sensation vanished, leaving only a tingling awareness on my skin. It wasn't painful, merely a gentle insistence, a nudge or a tug. Tentatively stepping forward, my foot snagged on a raised floorboard. Kneeling, I ran my fingers across the uneven surface, feeling the sharp edges where planks had warped and lifted. Rising, I noticed the mirrored dancers had faltered, their movements slowing, their indistinct heads turning fractionally in my direction. A knot tightened in my chest. I drew a deep breath. The air tasted ancient and desiccated. Curiosity warred with apprehension, urging me toward the ballroom's darker corners. A heavy curtain draped the rear wall. Reaching for it, my fingers met rough, stiff fabric. I pulled it aside, revealing a long, narrow corridor that plunged into darkness, terminating in what seemed a smaller chamber. No furniture was visible within. My torch beam, weak as it was, sliced through the gloom, illuminating peeling wallpaper and a floor thick with dust. Here, the scent intensified, sharpening into the unmistakable odor of rotting wood. Each step I took down the passage echoed unnervingly. Glancing back toward the main ballroom, the mirrors were visible at an oblique angle. The dancers remained, still revolving in their slow circles, caught in some timeless, repeating pattern. Unwilling to lose my bearings, I retreated to the relative familiarity of the main hall. I deposited my rucksack near the impassable door, retrieved the thermos, and sipped the coffee. It was lukewarm, offering little comfort. Hunger eluded me. The sandwich remained wrapped. Standing near the gramophone, I listened again to the melody's relentless cycle. It felt less like music, more like a mechanism stuck in time. A subtle vibration pulsed through the soles of my shoes, as if something tapped rhythmically from beneath the floor. Hesitantly, I stepped aside and pressed my ear to the wood. A faint, dry rustling rewarded my effort, a sound that made my scalp prickle. I recoiled, rubbing my arms, my palms suddenly damp, a cord of tension tightening across my neck. My gaze drifted back to the mirrors. The dancers now moved with a steady, measured pace, raising and lowering their arms, turning their heads left, then right, in perfect synchrony. Their forms seemed translucent, their features perpetually blurred. Stepping close to one reflective surface, I strained to discern eyes, a mouth, any defining characteristic. Only indistinct shapes rewarded my scrutiny. Humanoid suggestions clad in the ghostly outlines of old suits and long gowns. I waved a hand directly before the glass. They did not mirror the gesture, did not deviate from their programmed steps. A thorough scan of the room's corners yielded nothing. No projector, no hidden mechanism, just the guttering candles, the tireless gramophone, and the thick, expectant air. Perhaps an hour had elapsed when a palpable chill descended upon the room. My breath plumed visibly in the air. I chafed my hands together for warmth, the music, indifferent, played on. Drawn to the nearest candle, I observed its flame flicker violently, as though caught in a draught, yet the air remained perfectly still. The tall windows lining one wall were shut fast. I tested one. The latch was rusted solid, immovable. The glass felt frigid beneath my touch, pressing my forehead against the cold pane. I peered out, hoping for a glimpse of the mundane world. Only impenetrable darkness met my eyes, punctuated by the faint silhouettes of skeletal trees. A tap on the glass produced only a dull, non-resonant thud. Behind me, a floorboard uttered a sharp complaint. I spun around. Emptiness. Taking a hesitant step forward, I stopped, arrested by a sudden scent drifting on the air. Perfume. It was cloying and unfamiliar, redolent of decaying flowers, laced with something acridly bitter. Certainly not originating from me or my belongings. A cough escaped me. Simultaneously, I felt an unnerving proximity near my face. A sense of presence brushing against my cheek. I leaned back instinctively. Though no visible form occupied the space, the feeling intensified. Tentatively, I reached out a hand into the void. My palm met nothing tangible. Yet the subtle pressure returned to my arm. A gentle but firm guidance urges me toward the ballroom's center. Slowly, cautiously, I obeyed, each step punctuated by the floor's protesting creaks. Upon reaching the very heart of the vast room, the gramophone's melody seemed to swell, gaining volume. I noticed immediately that the dancers in the mirrors had ceased their movement. They hung suspended, hovering motionless, arms perpetually raised. I stared, holding my breath, anticipating something. After a pregnant pause lasting several seconds, they resumed their dance, but transformed. Their movements were now jarringly swift, almost frantic, stripped of its former grace. A distinct scraping sound emanated from the corner. My eyes darted towards the gramophone. Its winding handle was visibly turning, rotating slowly on its own accord. The record beneath the needle wobbled precariously. As I stepped toward it, the music erupted in a fit of crackles and skips. I tapped the side of the machine sharply. The needle jumped. Silence blessedly fell, only to be shattered moments later as the same inexorable melody resumed. Kneeling, I searched desperately for a switch, a hidden lever, anything. There was nothing. The device appeared anciently simple: a horn, a turntable, a needle. My fingers brushed the cold metal of the horn. It was inert, transmitting no vibration. Yet the music poured forth, clear and undeniable. I scrambled backward, a leaden weight settling in my chest, my legs feeling wooden and unresponsive. Each breath felt constricted, shallow. The silence between the endlessly repeating notes felt thin, fragile. No sound penetrated from the outside world. No whisper of wind, no distant traffic, no nocturnal creatures, only this suffocating loop of music. Resolve hardened within me. I had to try the door again. Grasping the handle, I heaved. Unmoved, I threw my weight against it. Nothing. A frustrated kick echoed hollowly through the chamber. Rummaging in my rucksack, I located my small pocket knife. I attempted to wedge the blade into the doorframe, seeking purchase. It slipped uselessly, cursing under my breath. I tried again, scraping flakes of ancient paint from the solid wood, but achieving nothing more. Sweat beaded on my forehead. I wiped it away with a trembling sleeve. Defeated, I retreated once more to the room's center. The mirrored dancers now spun with escalating speed, their ethereal feet never grazing the floorboards. I watched their dizzying, repetitive whirl. Their movements had become erratic, jerky, their timing fractured, speeding up and slowing down at random intervals. The floor beneath me seemed alive, creaking with ever slight shift of my weight, even groaning softly when I stood perfectly still. Looking down at my own feet, I lifted one experimentally. The wood beneath complained regardless. A shiver traced its way up my spine. Crouching low, I pressed my palm flat against the floor. It felt solid, yet beneath the surface I sensed that subtle, deep vibration again. Like something immense shifting in the foundations below. Rising, I retrieved my notebook, forcing myself to document the escalating phenomena. The temperature fluctuations, the increasingly bizarre reflections, the phantom smells and touches, the stubbornly locked door. The pen flowed, but my handwriting betrayed the tremor in my hand. My fingers felt numb with cold. Flipping back through the pages, I saw the growing catalogue of the inexplicable. Setting the notebook aside, I drained the last of the thermos. The coffee tasted acrid now. I forced down a small bite of the sandwich. The bread felt like sawdust, scratching my throat as I swallowed. Time became elastic, stretching and contracting. The gramophone droned on, a tireless sentinel of sound. The candles, though burning low, showed no sign of extinguishing. Pulling the blanket from my back, I wrapped it tightly around my shoulders, a flimsy shield against the pervasive chill. I began to pace again, a restless circuit of my prison. I tested each window anew. All remained stubbornly sealed. My knuckles rapped against the walls. Solid, unyielding. Pressing my ear to the cracks between panels, I strained to hear anything beyond the room, catching only the faintest susurrus, like distant, shuffling footsteps. Shaking my head vigorously, I fought against the encroaching weariness, the insidious pull of sleep. My eyes felt gritty and heavy. I forced myself through a series of stretches, trying to ease the ache settling deep in my back and shoulders. After an eternity measured in heartbeats and repeating musical phrases, a subtle shift occurred. The quality of the light permeating the tall windows seemed less absolute black, softening towards gray. Concurrently, the candle flames appeared to dim, their light waning. The gramophone's melody dragged, slowing perceptibly. In the mirrors, the dancers faltered, their frantic energy dissipating, their forms seeming to drift apart, losing cohesion. Hope, fragile but insistent, flickered within me. I approached the main door, one last time, my hand closing over the cold metal handle. I turned it. A loud, resonant click echoed through the ballroom. Pulling tentatively, the heavy door swung inward. Cool, blessedly fresh air rushed to meet me. I stumbled across the threshold, out into the nascent dawn. The sky overhead was a pale, washed-out gray. The skeletal trees now possessed discernible shapes against the brightening horizon. Casting a look back into the ballroom, I saw the candles still burning, though feebly now, their light almost defeated. The gramophone continued its spectral performance, but the sound was faint, distant. From this vantage point, the mirrors reflected only the empty room. The dancers were gone. stepping back inside momentarily. I gathered my scattered belongings, the notebook, the thermos, the blanket, unwilling to leave any part of myself behind. The gramophone, however, I left to its solitary vigil. Turning, I walked out, pulling the door close behind me. On impulse, I tried the handle from the outside. It was locked fast. Stepping away from the imposing structure, I drew deep breaths of the clean morning air. The tightness in my chest eased, my legs felt steady beneath me once more. My gaze swept over the old building, the grimy, impenetrable windows, the walls shedding paint like dry skin. Silence. No music drifted out. No strange lights flickered within. No one else was around. Standing there, clutching my rucksack, I listened to the profound quiet of the waking world. I swallowed, the sound loud in my own ears, then turned and began to walk away. No spectral figures shadowed my steps. The cloying perfume did not linger. The phantom pressure on my arm had vanished. A deep stiffness remained etched in my neck and shoulders. A physical memory of the night's tension, but I kept walking, putting distance between myself and that place. Images flickered behind my eyes. The door refusing to yield. The endlessly looping melody, the dancers eternally spinning, hovering just above the floor. My fingers tightened around the cover of my notebook. I did not look back. I simply left. It was the second night, swallowed by the small hours past midnight, when the unease first took tangible form. I'd risen, thirst clawing at my throat, seeking water. Beneath bare soles, the floorboards uttered their nightly plaints, sighs like arthritic joints. That scent permeated again, desiccated plaster, the ghost of aged timber. A persistent dampness clinging stubbornly to the apartment's shadowed recesses. My throat felt raspy, nerves still frayed threads from the upheaval of the move. A flick, a click. The hallway sconce sputtered to life, casting a wan, apologetic glow, just sufficient to navigate by. And there, held within the antique mirror, I saw it. This hallway looking-glass, a sentinel tall and narrow, was embedded opposite the bathroom entrance. Its frame, a tarnished effusion of Baroque foliage, featured curling leaves and miniature avian shapes, marred by time's small cruelties at the edges. The silvered surface itself, though wiped clean, possessed an inherent antiquity, perhaps merely a trick of the low wattage. Clad in a crumpled sleep shirt and worn sweats, I registered an anomaly in my reflected self. A diminishment, a subtle shrinking, and behind that diminished figure, adrift in the weak luminescence, hovered a suspicion, a shape ill-defined. I pivoted, heart seizing, breath snagged in my chest. Void, only the unburdened corridor stretching towards my bedroom door. Silence pressed upon my eardrums, a physical weight. Turning back, I edged closer to the glass. My reflection now appeared innocuous, solitary. The phantom presence evaporated. I swallowed, coaxing my respiration back towards rhythm, attributing the vision to frayed nerves. Stress, exhaustion, potent hallucinogens. This dilapidated apartment, after all, was an act of desperation. A cut-rate haven in a forgotten corner of the city, secured after the last job evaporated. Funds were perilously low. I'd convinced myself adaptability was key. Yet, an intrinsic wrongness had clung to the place from the outset. The neighbors, spectral figures themselves, offered no greetings. The window panes shuddered their complaints against the night winds. And then there was that damnable mirror, immovably fused to the wall. The landlord, questioned, had merely offered an indifferent shrug. Back within the dubious sanctuary of my bed, sleep remained elusive, chased away by the phantom image seared onto my retinas. I tried reconstructing it, a nebulous silhouette stationed behind me, utterly still, perhaps a coat slung carelessly, warped by tired eyes into something human. Eventually, oblivion claimed me. The following day unfolded in a muted procession of tasks. More boxes yielded their contents. Shirts found homes on closet hangers, faded family portraits populated dusty shelves. I immersed myself in the mundane, organizing utensils, inspecting the groan-prone plumbing, shuffling the scant furniture into arrangements. But the apartment maintained its profound, almost suffocating quietude. No urban hum penetrated, no neighborly music bled through the walls. Only a dense, muffled stillness. As evening deepened, I lit a solitary lamp in the living area, attempting to lose myself in a book, forcing my thoughts onto the printed page. Yet my gaze kept straying towards the hallway's threshold. The mirror remained unseen from this vantage, but its memory persisted, an irritating psychic burr. Before surrendering to bed, I resolved to confront the looking glass again. This time, I activated the brighter overhead fixture. Its bulb emitted a low, insistent buzz. I advanced cautiously, a knot tightening in my gut. Initially, nothing amiss. Just my own visage, fatigued eyes, a day's growth shadowing my jaw, staring back. I reached out, fingertips grazing the frame. The wood felt cool, alternating between smoothness and the roughness of chipped carvings. I pressed gently against the glass plane, unyielding. Stepping back, I scanned the reflected corridor behind me. Vacant, shapeless. Mollified, I extinguished the light and retreated. Yet something roused me once more, perhaps near 1 o'clock. A distinct chill had infiltrated the air, creeping up my forearms like icy tendrils. The familiar lament of the floorboards announced my passage into the hall. My heart already galloping without conscious cause, I refrained from illumination this time, relying solely on the meager street light filtering through a distant window. I looked towards the mirror. The figure materialized with stark clarity now. It stood directly behind my reflection, an arm's length separating us in the glass, a lean silhouette exceeding my own height, its shoulders canted at an unnatural angle. I held my breath captive. My own reflection remained, pale, eyes dilated with terror. But superimposed behind it, within the glass, loomed that, its head inclined slightly, as if in appraisal. Goose flesh prickled my skin. Perspiration pooled at my nape. With immense effort, I compelled myself to turn. Darkness. An empty passage, returning my gaze to the mirror. The figure persisted, stationed behind my reflected self. Details sharpened. Sunken orbits where eyes should be. Integument drawn taut across osseous prominences. The barest intimation of a warped smile. It remained motionless, yet its sheer presence seemed to leach warmth from the air, filling my lungs with glacial dread. I leaned forward incrementally, scrutinizing the reflection for any tremor, any shift. My throat constricted. Abruptly, my own image wavered. The entity's grin appeared to stretch wider, though no sound accompanied it. I slammed my palm against the light switch. The reflection snapped back to normalcy. Just me, steeped in visceral fear, no spectral intruder. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Sleep was unthinkable that night. Morning brought a forced attempt at rationality. Mirrors, low light, optical illusions. Perhaps a residual stain on the glass, a pattern misconstrued. The notion of shrouding the mirror arose, yet its flush mounting presented a challenge. Tape or tacks would be needed. I prowled the apartment, searching for supplies. An aged, rigid roll of duct tape surfaced in a kitchen drawer, alongside a threadbare bedsheet. My attempt to affix the sheet proved clumsy. The tape adhered poorly to the ornate frame. Eventually, a precarious covering was achieved, the fabric sagging unevenly. This, I told myself, would grant me peace. That afternoon, excavating a neglected corner cupboard, I unearthed a peculiar cache, a bundle of antique letters tucked behind a loose panel. The paper, brittle and foxed with age, exuded a faint aroma of mildew. Each envelope bore the name of a prior occupant, an Elias Vance. The script was spidery, the ink faded. Scanning the brittle pages, I deciphered scattered phrases. The looking glass you insisted on retaining, an unsettling awareness, cannot abide here longer. A metallic taste filled my mouth. My gaze involuntarily sought the hallway. The sheet hung over the mirror, impassive and still. Yet the letters sent a numbness creeping into my fingertips. Nightfall arrived with unwelcome haste. I resisted sleep, dozing fitfully on the sofa, the television murmuring at low volume. Around midnight, the electricity faltered. The room plunged into blackness. The TV silenced abruptly. The air grew heavy, stagnant. My own breathing sounded unnervingly loud, shallow gasps of panic. I activated my phone's flashlight, its beam cutting a path down the hallway. The sheet draped over the mirror seemed distorted in the stark illumination, bulging subtly as if pressed from behind. I rose with deliberate slowness, joints protesting. My world contracted to that single focal point. As I neared, a faint noise reached me, a delicate tap, tap, tap. I froze, heart battering my sternum, and extended a trembling hand. The instant my fingers contacted the fabric, it slid away, plummeting as though tugged from below. Within the mirror's dimly lit surface, I saw myself, phone beam wavering, and behind me, the figure. But it was no longer merely standing. Its eyes, vacant pits, were fixed upon mine. Its lips parted fractionally, forming silent words, or perhaps a soundless rictus. A strangled cry almost escaped me. I stumbled backward, the flashlight beam dancing erratically. Still, I forced the turn. Nothing, utter emptiness. Back in the reflection, however, the figure's arms were lifting. Without sound, it enacted a pantomime, hands curling in the air as if gripping an unseen object. Then it pointed towards my reflection and tapped insistently at what seemed to be the inside of the glass. I could almost swear I heard a faint, dry scratching, too ephemeral to be certain. Nausea roiled within me. The impulse to flee this apartment, to bolt the door and never look back, was overwhelming, but savings were non-existent, another move impossible, and something else, a morbid fascination, held me captive. I needed to comprehend this presence, its origins, its purpose. The subsequent day was consumed by futile investigation. The landlord, reached by phone, remained unhelpful, dismissing my concerns with platitudes about old buildings and accumulated junk. Online records yielded no history of Elias Vance or other past tenants. The letters spoke of a mirror, an unsettling presence. Had Vance endured this same terror? Had he perhaps never truly departed? As dusk bled into night, I prepared. A cumbersome armchair was laboriously maneuvered into the hallway, positioned directly before the mirror. My intent was to observe if the reflection depicted the entity circumventing the obstacle, any deviation from the established pattern. Hours crawled past. Midnight arrived again. My head pulsed with sleep deprivation. My mouth tasted of acrid coffee residue. I stood before the mirror, the hallway light extinguished, only the phone's glow piercing the gloom. My reflection gazed back, taut, shadowed beneath the eyes. Behind me, the figure stood more sharply defined than ever. I could discern the thin parchment-like quality of its skin, the lips stretched tight, the eyes like abyssal wells. It did not flicker or fade. It gestured once more, slowly elevating one hand to touch the inner surface of the mirror, as if it were a pane separating two worlds. My stomach clenched. I reached forward, my own hand meeting the cold, solid glass. Instantly, the figure's hand in the reflection aligned perfectly with mine. I snatched my hand back as if burned. It smiled, that crooked, silent rictus, then inclined its head, an expression akin to disappointment crossing its features. I spun around, desperate, hoping to catch it manifest in the physical space. Nothing. Void. I whirled back. The figure now pressed its face closer to the glass, its mouth forming silent syllables. I could almost decipher them, but recoiled from the potential meaning. My body trembled uncontrollably. The air grew perceptibly colder. A primal certainty screamed within me. This thing desired an exchange. It wanted me on its side of the silvered barrier. Bile surged. Acting on pure instinct, I seized the nearest substantial object, a heavy table lamp, and swung it with all my strength at the mirror. A sharp, percussive crack echoed through the apartment. Glass fragments rained onto the floorboards. The frame splintered. My heart hammered violently, threatening to rupture my chest. As the motes of dust settled, I looked down at the wreckage. My reflection stared back from dozens of fractured surfaces, distorted, fragmented. Amidst the shards, I half expected to see the figure's face replicated, but saw only variations of my own shattered visage. I struggled to marshal my thoughts. Departure was imperative. Escape. Yet, as I turned, something snagged my attention. One piece of the mirror, the largest triangular shard, still held the reflection. Just the figure's eyes, obsidian and hollow, staring directly at me. I kicked it away in terror, my stomach twisting into knots. No sound emanated from it, but a silent, incandescent fury seemed to hum in the air around me. Dawn discovered me huddled on the sofa, cocooned in blankets, bordering on delirium. fitful sleep brought swarms of nightmares. Upon waking, I swept the shattered mirror fragments into a cardboard box, averting my gaze from their surfaces. My chest felt constricted, as though filled with cold smoke. The urge to dispose of the glass was strong, yet abandoning it, dumping it somewhere, felt irresponsible, like knowingly passing on a contagion. Instead, I relegated the box to the deepest corner of the closet, concealed behind winter coats and luggage, hidden from sight for the time being. I attempted to resume normalcy, but every reflective surface became a source of anxiety. The gleaming toaster, a window pane catching the twilight, each potentially harboring a fleeting glimpse of something behind me. The hairs on my neck prickled constantly. My breathing remained shallow. Logically, I knew it was gone. I had destroyed its conduit. Yet relief remained elusive, supplanted by an insidious suspicion that I had somehow absorbed a part of it, that its observation persisted. My skin felt different, cooler to the touch. My eyes, meeting their reflection in the bathroom mirror that morning, seemed darker, deeper. Or perhaps it was merely exhaustion playing tricks. Late that afternoon, I paused before a small mirrored picture frame on my desk. One of the few reflective objects I dared leave uncovered. There, for the barest fraction of a second, I perceived it, a faint blurring of the air behind my shoulder, the suggestion of a shape. I blinked, and it vanished. But the sensation lingered, that hollow, watchful presence, patient and starved, haunting the periphery of my vision. I didn't flee. Finances and a stubborn pride kept me rooted here, yet comfort became an alien concept. Every reflection felt like a potential aperture. Every nightfall carried a whispering chill down the hallway. I can still feel those eyes, even now, perpetually behind me, waiting for a moment of lapsed vigilance. It never truly departed, I suspect. The apartment's ancient secrets adhere to me now, mirrored in every shard of memory I carry. And I understand, with chilling certainty, the mirror's dominion isn't broken. It has merely shifted its residence. Now it dwells behind my eyes, poised to reveal itself anew. Midnight breathed across the skeletal iron of the Ferris wheel, its groan a low lament over the nightmare unfurling below. Huddled behind the splintered ruin of a ticket booth, camera cold against my ribs, the chilling certainty dawned. This wasn't merely the documentation of decay. It was an unwilling audience to malice. And survival had become the only frame left to capture. Elias, that's me, a chronicler of forgotten spaces, a photographer drawn to the melancholic poetry of dereliction. Urban entropy is my muse, its haunting beauty the currency of my trade. Yet, no amount of time spent navigating the ghosts of architecture braced me for the abyss waiting within the gates of the defunct Dreamland Park. Whispers had long circulated about Dreamland, a vibrant hub of manufactured joy through the neon-washed 80s and 90s, its laughter choked by a cascade of misfortune, accidents, fiscal hemorrhaging, culminating in its shuttering just after the millennium's turn. Since then, silence and vegetation waged a slow war for dominion. Fellow explorers spoke of it with a peculiar reverence, hinting at a wrongness that transcended typical desolation. The pull was irresistible. I slipped onto the grounds as twilight bled across the sky, painting the overgrown asphalt lot in hues of bruise and ember. The main gate sagged, a drunken sentinel, its promise of "Welcome to Dreamland," a flaking, ironic epitaph. Passing through the breach, camera poised, an involuntary tremor traced my spine. This place felt watchful. The first hours unfolded in a disquieting calm. I navigated the skeletal remains of rides, the crumbling facades of forgotten delights, my lens capturing the slow surrender to time. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by the groan of tortured metal, or the furtive rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. Phantom movements flickered at the edge of vision, dissolving into nothing upon scrutiny. Midnight approached. Above, the Ferris wheel clawed at the star-dusted canvas of the night sky, a colossal, empty clock face. Then sound fractured the stillness. Voices drifted on the cool air. Not the boisterous echoes of fellow trespassers, but something clipped, tense, laced with an undercurrent of frustration. Shipments running behind. The director won't like this delay. Easy. No patrols out here anymore. Place is perfect. A cold pause. This wasn't urban exploration anymore. This was intrusion into something far darker. Prudence screamed retreat back to the car, straight to the authorities. But the storyteller's instinct, that damnable need to know, won out. Gear stowed, I moved, melting into the shadows cast by defunct attractions. Edging nearer, hugging the peeling paint of a concession stand, I risked a glance. The sight froze the marrow in my bones. 5 figures occupied a small clearing, silhouettes stark against the faint ambient light, each cradling the unmistakable shape of a firearm. Nearby sat stacked crates, their contents obscured, but the sinister purpose radiating outwards. This was no petty theft. It was calculated, organized, dangerous. Instinct took over. Camera lifted, framing the scene. Faces, weaponry, the illicit cargo, evidence. A deep breath held, then the soft click of the shutter. In the profound quiet, it sounded like a thunderclap. Time seemed to stutter. Then a head snapped around, eyes finding my hiding place with unnerving accuracy. A harsh voice ripped the night. Visitor. No thought, only flight. The derelict park erupted. Shouts caromed off rusted metal. Gunfire cracked, sharp and terrifyingly close. I plunged into the labyrinth of decay, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, the metallic tang of adrenaline flooding my mouth. Footsteps pounded behind, spreading out, attempting to flank, to corral. My only edge, hours spent charting this forgotten landscape. But they possessed numbers, firepower, and the territorial imperative. The gaping maw of the funhouse offered sanctuary, or so I hoped. Inside, absolute blackness swallowed me. I stumbled, hands outstretched, navigated by memory and prayer, avoiding treacherous drops and decaying obstacles. Behind me, the invaders entered, their flashlight beams slicing the dark, bouncing wildly off fractured mirrors, creating a disorienting phantasmagoria. I shrank into a recess, stifling ragged breaths. No need to hide, a voice oozed, distorted by the acoustics. Let's just chat. The splintered wood inches from my head, a fresh scar from a near miss, screamed otherwise. My vision, adapting, caught a sliver of moonlight, egress partially blocked by fallen debris. I began a painstaking crawl. Almost there, when a floorboard groaned, then snapped underfoot. A stumble, a collision with glass, a sickening shatter. There. No time for thought. I launched myself towards the light, the whisper of displaced air telling me how close the next bullet had come. Erupting from the funhouse, stealth abandoned, I sprinted through the ghostly midway, past the vacant stairs of defunct game stalls. Desperation drove me into one, collapsing beneath a grimy counter. Footsteps closed in, methodical, searching, trapped, my hand, scrabbling for purchase, brushed against cold metal. An old shooting gallery air rifle, relic of a forgotten prize. Useless against their hardware, yet a spark born of pure panic. Waiting until the sounds were almost upon me, I drew a shaky breath, surged upwards, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle produced a sharp pop. A surprisingly potent mimicry of gunfire in the enclosed space. It worked. Confusion, shouts, men diving for non-existent cover. In that fleeting moment of chaos, I bolted, sprinting towards the park's perimeter. My lungs screamed, legs turned to cinder blocks, but the rusted entrance gate beckoned, and beyond it, my battered sedan. Never had such a mundane object seemed so beautiful. Keys trembled in my grasp. Footsteps hammered closer. The lock clicked. I threw myself inside, twisting the ignition. The engine sputtered, caught, roared. Just as they spilled from the park gates, I slammed the gear shift into reverse, tires shrieking protest on the asphalt. Glancing in the rear view, I saw them scrambling into a dark van. The pursuit was on. What followed blurred into a high-octane ballet of terror. Down lightless service roads I flew, the van a predatory shadow clinging to my tailpipe. Each bend was a blind prayer, each straight a desperate gamble against their superior machine. Only upon reaching the relative anonymity of the main highway, weaving into the sparse tapestry of late-night travelers, did their headlights finally recede. Still, I didn't ease off the accelerator until the reassuring blue lights of a police station painted my windshield. The ensuing days were a whirlwind. Depositions, flashing cameras, fragmented recollections relayed under harsh fluorescent lights. My photographs, visceral proof coupled with my harrowing account, became the linchpin that dismantled a significant arms trafficking ring. Dreamland, their clandestine hub for years, hidden beneath layers of neglect. Do I regret that night? The question echoes. The terror was absolute, mortality a breath away. Yet the answer remains no. We dragged the malignancy into the light. Today, the lure of forgotten places still calls, but a new caution tempers my curiosity. The true menace isn't always the rot or the spectral silence. Sometimes, it's the living secrets these places guard and the lengths some will go to ensure they remain buried. So should you ever feel the pull of a decaying amusement park, its rusted gates whispering invitation, recall dreamland. Behind the peeling paint and silent rides, shadows much deeper than neglect might stir. And unlike the distorted reflections in a funhouse mirror, the peril could be terrifyingly real. The house received Elias in the late afternoon, under a sky the color of bruised plums. Air hung heavy in the stillness, thick with the scent of damp plaster, and time left undisturbed. His task was precise, outlined in the crisp letter. Inventory, the scattered remnants, gears, faces, casings of antique chronometers. The front door groaned its reluctance as he shouldered it open. Inside, a narrow hall swallowed the weak daylight. He deposited his valise onto a small spindle-legged table, the wood dry beneath his fingers, and exhaled a breath held captive since the drive began. Some distant relation, a collector long past, had owned this place, the letter explained. Decades, perhaps, it had stood sealed against the world. Elias flicked the hall light switch. A bulb sputtered, casting epileptic shadows before settling into a dim, unsteady pulse. Along the walls, obscured by a fine shroud of dust, hung portraits of somber-faced ancestors, their painted eyes seeming to follow his intrusion. He moved deeper, mapping the silence. The corridor bled into a drawing room choked by heavy velvet drapes that muted the already fading light. An old Persian rug, its patterns dissolving into threadbare patches, lay like a faded memory on the floor. Against the far wall stood a grandfather clock, tall and austere, silent. Its hands, ornate brass filigree, were frozen at 13 minutes past 4. Elias approached, drawn by its stillness. The pendulum, a heavy brass disc, hung perfectly inert within its glass tomb. A gentle tap on the crystal elicited nothing. He offered a small shrug to the empty room and turned towards the staircase, its wooden treads sighing beneath his weight like an old man disturbed from sleep. A distinct chill permeated the upper landing, raising goose flesh along his forearms. At the stairhead, a cramped passage offered 3 doors. One yielded a bedroom steeped in the acrid perfume of mothballs and decay. Another revealed a bathroom, its mirror fractured into a spiderweb of silvered lines. The final door, tucked away at the corridor's terminus, guarded the way to the attic. He pulled it open. A set of raw wooden steps ascended into gloom. A current of air, cool and laden with the odor of dust and something vaguely organic, drifted down. His torch beam sliced through the darkness, illuminating intricate constellations of cobwebs in the upper corners. Reaching the attic proper, he found rows of cardboard boxes slumped on trestle tables, wooden crates huddled in the shadows, and suspended from the rafters, a single naked bulb on a frayed cord. A tug, a flicker, and then a weak amber glow pushed back the oppressive dark. What seized his attention first was the shelf. It ran the attic's full length, burdened by a silent congregation of clocks. Tiny, intricate pocket watches nestled beside robust mantel clocks with elaborate painted faces. He drew nearer, squinting in the inadequate light. 2 dozen, perhaps 3, stood sentinel, and every single one, regardless of size, style, or state of repair, displayed the exact same time, 4:13. A cold fist clenched inside his chest. It made no sense. Some lacked glass, their faces exposed to the dust. Others were pitted with rust, hands missing entirely. Yet, where hands remained visible, they pointed rigidly, unequivocally, to that precise moment. He lifted one, a small brass travel clock with a delicate handle. The metal felt unnaturally cold. Its second hand was snapped off, but the hour and minute indicators were locked fast. He twisted the setting knob. It refused to yield. Setting it down, he selected a larger clock, its back bearing a winding keyhole. He attempted to wind it. A faint resistance met his effort, a tightening within, but the face remained immutable. 4:13. With a sigh that felt thin in the vast space, he opened his notebook and began the inventory. Type, approximate era, maker's marks, condition. An hour bled away. 15 clocks documented. His spine protested, demanding respite. Putting the notebook aside, he hefted a substantial mantel clock from its place. This one possessed a hinged glass door, allowing access to the hands. He swung it open, the small brass latch clicking softly. Reaching inside, his fingertips made contact with the minute hand. Tentatively, he pushed. It moved, scraping faintly. He coaxed it forward. 4:14, 4:15, 4:17. Then solid resistance. His fingers slipped on the smooth metal. With an audible snap, the hand spun violently backward, faster than seemed possible, returning with unerring accuracy to 4:13. The force startled him. The clock nearly tumbled from his grasp. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the silence. His palms were slick with sudden sweat. Carefully, reverently, he placed the clock back on the shelf and retreated several steps. The attic air felt colder now, charged with a static tension. A gust of wind rattled the small, grime-streaked window at the far end. The sound accompanied by the dry rustle of unseen leaves scraping against the roof slates. The atmosphere thickened, heavy with the scent of aged wood and creeping mildew. Just a mechanical anomaly, he told himself. A shared point of failure across disparate mechanisms. Coincidence. He extinguished the feeble bulb, the darkness rushing back instantly, and descended, pulling the attic door firmly shut behind him. Downstairs, in the drawing room, he established a small workspace at an old mahogany desk, its surface scarred by time. His portable lamp cast a cone of clean white light, a welcome contrast to the house's weak illumination. His own wristwatch showed 7:15 p.m. A hollow ache in his stomach reminded him of skipped meals. He retrieved a wrapped sandwich and a bottle of water from his valise. The house settled around him, punctuated only by the occasional groan of timbers settling deeper into their foundations. His gaze kept drifting to the grandfather clock, looming like a dark sentinel in the corner. He resolved to inspect it. Rising, he crossed the room and opened its tall glass door. The pendulum bob was tarnished, motionless. The winding key lay inside the case, glinting dully. He inserted it, turned, gears clicked reluctantly within, a dry, complaining sound, but the hands on the great painted face remained steadfastly at 4:13. He tested the hour hand directly. It was immovable. With another sigh, heavier this time, he closed the door. Dinner consumed, fatigue from the journey and the unsettling discoveries pressed down on him. He located the bedroom on the second floor, unpacked minimally, and set his phone alarm for the stark hour of 6:01 a.m. The bed felt unforgivingly firm beneath a thin mattress. The sheets carried a faint, stale scent, and the pillows were compressed nearly flat. He closed his eyes, the image of countless clock faces locked at 4:13 swimming behind his eyelids. Sleep claimed him, but it was a shallow, restless tide. Sometimes in the deep heart of the night, a sound ripped him awake. A sharp, percussive ringing, metallic and insistent, echoed down the corridor. His first thought was the alarm, but this was louder, harsher, continuous, then abruptly it ceased. He sat bolt upright, breath catching in his throat, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his sternum. The room was utterly black, save for the faint rectangle of the door, outlined against the hallway's deeper shadows. Another ring began, different this time. A chorus of chimes, overlapping, discordant, as if multiple clocks were striking simultaneously, their voices layered into a jarring cacophony. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, fumbling for his phone, its screen flaring to life as a makeshift torch. He crept towards the hallway, the floorboards cool beneath his bare feet. Silence had fallen once more. His own soft footfalls were the only sound disturbing the profound stillness. Reaching the top of the stairs, he peered down into the Stygian well of the lower floor. Faint moonlight filtered through the tall front windows, sketching ghostly shapes in the drawing room below. Suddenly, the house erupted. Several clocks chimed as one. The deep, resonant bong of the grandfather clock underpinning a frantic jumble of smaller, tinny bells. The entire structure seemed to resonate with the overlapping clashing tones. It lasted perhaps 5 seconds. A wave of sound that washed over him and then cut off with surgical precision, leaving a silence that felt heavier, more profound than before. His chest felt impossibly tight. Drawing breath was a conscious effort. He wiped a bead of sweat, tracing a cold path down his temple. His mouth was desert dry. "This shouldn't be happening," a voice screamed inside his head. "They aren't wound, they're all broken." He scrambled downstairs, hands slapping against the wall, searching for the light switch. It clicked, and the weak bulb flickered back to its unsteady life. In the drawing room, his eyes shot to the grandfather clock. Still 4:13. He pressed his ear against its wooden side. Utter silence. No tick, no whir, no hint of mechanical life. Then he saw them. Arranged in a neat, deliberate row upon the mantelpiece above the cold fireplace were several smaller clocks. He recognized them instantly from the attic shelf. A cold dread pooled in his stomach. He hadn't brought them down. They sat there, smugly asserting their presence, each face reflecting the dim light, each pair of hands fixed at 4:13. A chill crawled up the back of his neck, unrelated to the house's ambient temperature. He backed away slowly, retreating into the hallway as if escaping a physical presence. A musty odor filled his nostrils, the smell of long stagnant air, disturbed perhaps from some cellar depth. The urge to flee, to burst out into the night and drive until this house was a distant memory, warred fiercely with the contract binding him here, with the stubborn insistence that there must be a rational explanation. He checked his phone. 3:11 a.m. Daylight felt impossibly far away. He forced himself back towards the stairs, back to the questionable sanctuary of the bedroom. Locking the door felt futile, but he did it anyway. He paced the small room, each footstep on the bare wood echoing the house's vast emptiness. Yet, it didn't feel empty. It felt observant. His body hummed with tension, muscles knotted, breath coming in shallow sips. Eventually, he lay down again, his mind a frantic carousel of frozen clocks, impossible chimes, and inexplicably migrating objects. Morning found him leaden-eyed and exhausted, uncertain if true sleep had come at all. He consumed a dry protein bar from his pack and made directly for the attic, driven by a grim determination. The door remained closed as he'd left it. He mounted the steps, the familiar dusty chill greeting him, and pulled the light cord. More gaps punctuated the long shelf. More clocks had vanished, presumably the ones now gracing the drawing room mantel. His notebook lay undisturbed beside a stack of boxes. He forced himself towards a large wooden crate he hadn't yet examined, prying open its lid. Inside lay a jumble of watch components, loose gears like metallic insects, several incomplete clock faces staring blankly upwards. He began sorting, noting, trying to impose order on the chaos. But his eyes kept straying to the remaining clocks on the shelf, their hands locked in that silent, unchanging testament. 4:13. He lifted a heavier clock from a box on the floor. An old wooden wall clock, its glass cover clouded with grime, smelling faintly of dust and aged varnish. He placed it carefully on a small, sturdy table. Locating the winding aperture on its face, he selected a key from the small toolkit he carried and inserted it. He turned. Deep within the casing, gears meshed with faint clicks. He felt the mainspring tighten, building potential energy. He watched, holding his breath, as the slender second hand quivered, then began a slow, halting creep past the 12. A fragile spark of relief ignited within him. Perhaps this one. Then it stopped, dead, and the minute hand, with that same violent, unnatural speed he'd witnessed before, snapped back to its appointed position. 4:13. His eyes widened. A wave of icy cold washed through him, from his scalp, which prickled sharply, down his arms and into his chest. He took an involuntary step back, rubbing his face with trembling hands, trying to regulate his suddenly ragged breathing. He dedicated the morning to the grim task of cataloging the contents of the remaining crates, working with mechanical efficiency. After a meager lunch, he compelled himself to try adjusting the clocks once more. Each attempt was a fresh defeat. Hands refused to move, or, if coaxed past the fatal point, snapped back with that unnerving whip-like speed. Sweat beaded on his forehead, trickling into his eyes. He found himself wiping his damp palms repeatedly on his trousers. A strange reluctance to look away from them took hold. A paranoid fear they might shift, rearrange themselves, the moment his gaze left them. But they remained static, eternally fixed at 4:13. That evening, he resolved to keep vigil downstairs. He positioned a small folding chair near the fireplace in the drawing room, facing the hall and the looming grandfather clock. He extinguished the main lights, relying solely on the focused beam of his portable lamp. Silence descended, thick and watchful, broken only by an irregular sound he couldn't quite place. Not the steady tick-tock of a healthy clock, but more of a faint, intermittent scraping or tapping, its source elusive. His nerves felt stretched thin, raw ends exposed. His legs jittered with suppressed energy. Around 9 o'clock, the silence shattered. A single, sharp clang, like a hammer striking anvil, reverberated through the room. He leaped from the chair, heart slamming against his ribs. Then came the chimes, a dissonant cascade, overlapping, echoing strangely off the plaster walls. He held his breath, listening intently. The tones were slow, ponderous, distorted, as if struggling through deep water. Then, as before, they ceased abruptly, plunging the house back into an unnerving absolute quiet. He flicked on every light switch he could find, bathing the downstairs rooms in a harsh, revealing glare. He began a patrol. On the kitchen counter, where nothing had been before, sat a small, utilitarian clock. Its hands pointed to 4:13. Inside a glass-fronted cabinet in the dining room, nestled amongst dusty porcelain figures, rested another timepiece previously unseen. 4:13. His throat felt constricted, dry. The urge to abandon everything, to simply run, was almost overwhelming. Yet some stubborn part of him clung to the idea of morning, of daylight dispelling the shadows and revealing a mundane explanation. Old pneumatic systems, perhaps. Timers set erratically. But how did they move? He remained downstairs until midnight ticked past on his own reliable watch. His gaze fixed alternately on the silent grandfather clock and the shadowed archway leading to the stairs. Finally, exhaustion overriding fear, he decided to retreat upstairs. At the foot of the staircase, he paused. A soft scratching sound drifted down from the landing above, delicate but distinct, like fine metal dragging across wood. He swallowed hard against the lump in his throat and began to climb, each riser groaning its protest under his weight. As he reached the second-floor landing, the scratching ceased. He stood motionless, staring at the closed attic door, waiting, listening, nothing. He retreated to his bedroom, locking the door again, the click echoing too loudly. He sat on the edge of the stiff mattress, his heart refusing to settle into a normal rhythm. The feeling of being observed, palpable and intense, prickled his skin. He lay back eventually, still fully dressed, staring up at the shadowed ceiling. His mind replayed the impossible tableau of the clocks, the memory of the waterlogged chimes echoing in his ears. Was he losing his grip on reality? He glanced at his phone, the bright numerals displaying the current, relentlessly progressing time, a stark contrast to the house's frozen moment. Sleep eventually claimed him, a thin, troubled doze. He surfaced once around 3 a.m., listening intently for the chimes. Only silence answered. He waited, eyes fixed on the door, before drifting off again into uneasy dreams. When true morning arrived, it brought with it a dull headache and a profound stiffness in his limbs. He splashed cold water on his face in the bathroom with the cracked mirror. The fragmented reflection showed a pale, strained version of himself. A decision crystallized. Finish the inventory quickly, efficiently, and leave. He would pack the most accessible clocks and depart. He climbed to the attic, a sense of grim purpose overlaying his fear. Inside, more clocks were gone from the shelves. The few remaining held their silent vigil at 4:13. He noticed several empty boxes. Ones he was certain he hadn't touched, now shifted, moved aside as if by unseen hands. Pulling out his phone, he took several pictures of the depleted shelves, documenting the state of things. He began gathering the remaining smaller clocks, placing them carefully into a large, sturdy crate. As he worked, sealing the lid with tape, a loud clang erupted behind him. He spun around, heart leaping into his throat. A small metal-cased clock lay face down on the dusty floorboards, having apparently fallen from a high shelf. He picked it up. The glass was intact, The hands still pointed faithfully to 413. Breathing heavily, sweat trickling down his back despite the attic's chill, he placed the fallen clock on top of the crate and began dragging the heavy container towards the attic steps. Reaching the second-floor hallway, maneuvering the awkward crate, a sudden intense blast of cold air struck him, making him gasp and nearly lose his grip. His knees felt weak trembling, but he wrestled the crate into the bedroom. His plan was simple now: pack his suitcase, load the car, and drive away. He could report back, explain the situation, perhaps return with assistance, but he would not spend another night in this house. He went downstairs to retrieve another empty box for his personal belongings. The drawing room light was on, but flickering erratically. He stopped dead in the doorway. Arranged in a loose semicircle on the floor, around the low coffee table, sat at least 5 clocks. They hadn't been there last night. They hadn't been there when he went up to the attic earlier. Each face, varied in style but united in purpose, showed 413. He averted his eyes, refusing to engage, grabbed an empty cardboard box from the hall, and turned back towards the stairs. As he moved, he heard it. A series of faint, distinct ticks emanating from the drawing room behind him. He walked faster, his pulse hammering in his ears. Back in the bedroom, he placed the box beside the crate. Then he noticed the bedroom door had swung almost fully shut. He didn't remember closing it. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A preset calendar reminder. Premises checkout due tomorrow. He glanced at the screen, the normal sane progression of numbers showing nearly 10 a.m. That settled it. He wasn't waiting. The job could remain unfinished. The tension in his chest felt like a physical weight, crushing the air from his lungs. He moved with frantic energy, grabbing clothes, notes, stuffing everything haphazardly into his valise, zipping it shut with trembling fingers. He kept glancing over his shoulder, irrationally expecting to see a new clock materialize on the dresser or the nightstand. Carrying his valise and the empty box, he hurried down the stairs. As he reached the bottom step, another clank sounded sharp and close. It came unmistakably from the grandfather clock. Driven by a final desperate need to confront it, he strode over, pressed his hand flat against the glass panel, and yanked the door open. Nothing. The pendulum hung motionless. The tarnished weights were still. The painted face remained locked at 413. He slammed the door shut with a violence that surprised him and hurried to the front entrance. The heavy door scraped open, releasing him into the blessedly ordinary daylight. His heart still raced, but the touch of fresh air on his skin felt like a benediction. He carried his luggage to the car, threw it into the back, and slid into the driver's seat, the tension still knotting the muscles in his arms and neck. The engine turned over, catching reassuringly. He put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb, away from the house of frozen time. Even as the distance grew, he couldn't shake the unnerving sensation that unseen eyes were watching his retreat, that dozens of clock faces were tracking his departure, their hands forever fixed on that impossible hour. He found himself checking the rearview mirror compulsively, half expecting to see something monstrous gaining on him. But the road behind was empty, mundane. All he could do was drive. gripping the wheel too tightly, trying to outrun the tightness in his chest and the phantom echo of overlapping chimes that seemed to resonate still in the hollows of his memory. The image persisted, burned onto his retinas, every hand, on every clock, stuck fast at 4:13. How or why remained terrifyingly unanswered. He only knew with absolute certainty that he would never go back. The fire sighed sparks into the vast, breathing dark, a lonely pulse against the forest's unnerving hush. 3 nights we'd been swallowed by this wilderness, and the wild's familiar symphony, the cricket's thrum, the owl's soft query, had dissolved. In its place settled a quietude so thick, so absolute, it prickled along the nerves. Our city dwellers' dream of escape we hadn't grasped then was twisted into a nightmare etched deep enough to shadow the years ahead. My name is Leo. I write code back in Boston, navigate concrete canyons, not untamed woods. My companions, Chloe, Ben, and Maya, shared my urban cage, and for months, this Adirondack immersion had been our whispered promise of freedom. We'd sought out this particular patch of isolation, far from trodden paths, craving the scenic balm of solitude. And the first 2 days? Perfection. We'd plunged into glacial lakes that stole our breath, trekked trails canopied in ancient green, and surrendered evenings to the fire's hypnotic dance, trading stories like currency, charring marshmallows to sweet, sticky oblivion. But the third sunset bled differently across the sky, painting the woods in shades of apprehension. Subtleties first. Ben, his eyes wide, claimed shadows writhed just beyond the firelight's reach, though our flashlight beams sliced only empty air. Chloe's pack, inexplicably, migrated from beside her tent to dangle absurdly from a branch 20 feet overhead. We manufactured laughter, blaming fatigue, campfire tales seeding overactive minds. Then came the 4th morning, and the prints. I found them, a perimeter etched around our sleeping camp. Too vast for any man, too bizarre for any known beast. They materialized from the dew-kissed earth and vanished just as abruptly into the dense undergrowth. Look, I managed, my voice a thin tremor I barely recognized. You need to see this. They gathered, their faces slowly mirroring the disturbed perplexity churning within me. What in God's name? Ben whispered, kneeling, tracing the impossible contours pressed into the ground. Maya, ever the pragmatist, sought refuge in reason. Some local kids, maybe. Playing a joke? Those novelty monster feet. Yet the explanation felt hollow, flimsy against the evidence. The impressions were profound, sunk deep by a weight no human frame could possess. And their configuration, an intrinsic wrongness radiated from them. A cold dread snaking up the spine. We argued options, voices strained. A part of me screamed to abandon everything, flee back towards the distant promise of our cars. But another, dangerous curiosity held sway. Besides, the trek itself felt perilous now, a day's journey through woods suddenly alien, potentially occupied. We resolved, finally, to stay, but with sharpened senses. establishing a rotating watch through the coming night, every ear straining against the oppressive silence, every eye probing the engulfing dark. My turn came in the deep stillness preceding dawn. That's when I heard it, a guttural rumble, low and resonant, seeming to vibrate from the very soil beneath me, emanating from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. I became ice, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, surely loud enough to wake the dead, let alone my sleeping friends. Then movement flickered at the edge of vision. Eyes, unnatural, luminous green embers ignited in the black tapestry of the underbrush. Not one pair, several. A silent watching cordon. My throat locked. A warning cry died before it could be born. Abruptly, as if a switch were thrown, the eyes winked out, dissolving back into the impenetrable gloom. I remained trembling until the first tentative fingers of sunlight pierced the canopy. Recounting the experience, I saw the doubt flicker in their eyes. But disbelief evaporated as we emerged into the morning light. Our campsite was violated. Supplies torn open, food containers shredded, their contents scattered with violent abandon. The true horror, however, lay etched into the rough bark of a towering pine. Two crudely gouged words. Get out. Debate ceased. We moved with frantic speed, shedding gear deemed non-essential, propelled by a singular urge: escape. As we plunged back onto the trail, the sensation of being observed was a physical pressure, a prickling weight on the back of my neck. Twigs snapped unnervingly close behind us. More than once, I glimpsed colossal shapes flitting parallel to our path, always swallowed by the trees before my eyes could truly focus. Hours bled together, marked only by rising panic and fraying tempers. Then Chloe stopped abruptly, her breath catching. "Leo," she whispered, voice thin as spider silk. "We've been here before." She was right. Impossibly, despite map and compass, our desperate flight had looped us back to the violated sanctuary of our campsite. The remnants of our panicked departure lay scattered, but now, arranged deliberately, a crude circle formed from our abandoned belongings. And nestled in its center, something small, pale, alien. Ben, propelled by some alloy of courage and folly, crept forward. "It's a tooth," he breathed, lifting the object. Jagged, immense. I've never seen anything like it. Before thought could follow observation, a roar shattered the forest's deceptive calm. A sound so primal, so fundamentally wrong. It seemed to vibrate through our bones, shaking the very earth. Trees at the clearing's edge groaned, splintered, swayed violently as something of impossible scale began to move towards us. We scattered. Instinct usurped reason. Pure, unthinking flight. I heard the others thrashing through the undergrowth nearby, their ragged gasps mirroring my own burning lungs. Behind us, the pursuit was a cacophony of snapping branches and thudding weight, terrifyingly close. Time warped, became meaningless in the frantic green blurred passage through the woods. Agony flared in my legs. My chest felt ready to burst, yet raw terror fueled me onward. It was Maya, who saw the fissure between two colossal boulders. "Here! In here!" she yelled, scrambling into the narrow opening. We followed without a second thought, squeezing through the tight passage into a shallow, dark cavern. Silence descended, broken only by our desperate, ragged breathing. Then the sounds began outside. Heavy sniffing, the scrape of claws on stone as something immense probed, tested, tried to force the entrance wider. We huddled in the absolute blackness, terror a tangible presence, afraid even to risk a flashlight beam. Hours crawled by. The activity outside ebbed and flowed. Periods of frenzied scrabbling alternating with stretches of chilling silence. As true night fell, a new torment began. Voices, human voices drifting into the cave. For a delirious second, rescue seemed possible, but the tones were off. They sounded like our loved ones. Ben's mother, Chloe's sister, their voices laced with pleading, calling our names from the darkness. A trick we knew with cold, gut-deep certainty. A horrifying mimicry. "Don't answer," I hissed, grabbing Ben's arm as he instinctively started to call out to the phantom voice of his mother. "It's not real. It can't be." The night passed in a fugue state of fear, confusion, and strained listening. Finally, dawn painted the cave mouth a pale gray. The forest outside was silent once more. We waited, muscles screaming from cramped positions, thirst a sandpaper rasp in our throats, for what felt like an eternity before daring to emerge. The woods appeared deceptively normal. Birds sang, squirrels chattered, sunlight streamed warmly through the leaves. Only our ravaged appearances and the haunted, hollowed look in each other's eyes testified that the nightmare had been real. We navigated back to the ranger station with speed born of residual terror, not stopping until we saw the reassuring lines of civilization. The search party dispatched found nothing. No giant tracks. No message carved into the tree. No colossal tooth. Vanished like smoke. Years have spun out since. We've chased explanations down rabbit holes of cryptozoology and local folklore, even submitted to the unsettling depths of hypnosis, seeking buried fragments of memory. Nothing satisfies. Nothing explains. Sometimes, in the dead quiet of night, the memory surfaces unbidden. That guttural growl, the soul-chilling glow of those eyes. I have never gone back. I never will. Those woods belong to something else. Something ancient and inimical. And it made its sovereignty brutally clear. The four of us, once bound by friendship, are now tethered only by that shared trauma, orbits decaying over time. Yet, occasionally, the phone rings late. A panicked static on the line from Chloe, or Ben, or Maya. Words are unnecessary. I know the dream has found them again. The one where the cave isn't found. Where the pursuit doesn't end. Where the forest claims us. And as I offer what hollow comfort I can across the wires, my own gaze inevitably drifts to the window, scanning the familiar suburban shadows, searching for the impossible glint of emerald eyes burning in the dark.